Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Tool and Tie podcast. Welcome, everybody. This is your host, Sat Sego, joined today by my co-host, Bunam Sego.
Hi, everybody.
So today we're actually going to have a really fun show. We're going to go back to our experience with our kitchen renovation more specifically. I picked kitchen renovation when today's topic is planning a renovation. And I wanted to pick the kitchen because I think the kitchen renovation, was one of the first ones we took on. And second, it taught us the most on planning a renovation. So last episode, we actually talked about building the courage to do a renovation. So it looks like you guys are in episode 4, so you've built the courage. That's why you are here with us on episode number 4. And today we're going to talk about planning a renovation. There are a number of steps that we're going to go through in terms of planning a kitchen renovation. We're going to have some great tips for you guys as well. And I also wanted to let you know, there was actually a project plan that I built specifically for this kitchen renovation. Without the plan, I think I would have been very, very much lost. I'm actually giving away the plan for free. So you can look at my kitchen renovation and you can download the copy of the plan if you go to toolandtie.com toolandtie.com/episode number 4. It actually breaks things out for you in terms of the phases, in terms of the specific activities, the costs, the resources and whatnot, and it gives you a whole overall picture in terms of what you're spending and making sure that you're within the budget, looking at your contingency fund as well. So all of that is in the plan. It's a really great plan. I've shared it with other people as well, and they've really enjoyed it. So today, we're gonna go through the steps of the renovation process that we sort of came up with. It works very well for us. And I think it's going to work very well for you guys as well. I've actually put this through the ringer with a couple of other homeowners as well, and they've used the methodology. And it's kind of funny, when I first showed them the methodology, they thought it was a fancy PowerPoint presentation, but that really wasn't it. By the end, when they've actually experienced some of the phases of the renovations, they actually took the framework that we came up with and pinned it on their refrigerator with a magnet to keep in mind in case they want to do another future renovation. So let's get started right into it. I'm going to name off the 6 phases of the renovation, and then we're going to talk about them a little bit more specifically. So step number 1 in the 6-phase framework that we came up with is the planning phase. Okay? Step number 2 is a demolition phase. Step number 3 is the adjustments and repairs phase. Step number 4 is the installation phase. Step number 5 is the refine phase, and step number 6 is the cleanup phase. Now, I'm also going to let you know that specifically with kitchen renovations, I've got an ebook that's coming out. It should be ready by the end of this month. By the end of this month being today is Thursday, May the 7th. So by May 31st, it should be up. And you can find out more information about that as well on www.toolandtie.com/episode 4. So let's get started right now into the planning phase. So when you're doing a home renovation, planning is one of the most important parts. And coming from a business environment, I've done a lot of project management. So I kind of had a bit of an edge coming into this. So that's why I built the project plan the way that I did, because it makes logical sense. It makes logical sense in the business world. So why not in the home renovation world? And I got to say, planning is one of the most important aspects of it. It's just like if you're going to, refinish your kitchen cabinets, for example, the prep work sometimes is that much more important than the actual work itself, because you really want to make sure that whatever you're going to do is rock solid before you actually get into it. So in the planning phase, there's actually a couple of phases, or a couple of sub-phases, I should say, within the planning phase. And the first is space planning. You want to make sure that when you're actually going to create a layout for your kitchen, that you visualize that layout in advance, because a lot of your future work is going to depend on that vision. And what I mean by that is, where are the cabinets going to go? Where are the appliances going to go? Where are the fixtures going to go? What kind of fixtures do you want? And I talk a lot about this in my ebook as well, and I get a lot more specific into things like, planning for things like working and non-working space, and that's information you can find from the ebook. But essentially, working space are places where you're actually going to do work there, as in like, cut, prepare food and whatnot. And non-working space would be something where it's more of real estate that's taken up by like appliances like microwaves and toasters and whatnot. And you want to make sure you have the right balance between the two, because if you have more than one than the other, you may be at a disadvantage. The other thing about the planning phase you want to be careful about or keep in mind about is plan for materials. So this is the point where you're actually going to pick the material. So are you going to get MDF cabinets versus maple cabinets? Are you going to get quartz versus granite versus laminate? What kind of handles are you going to get? And this phase is very important, because if you don't plan for this and you forget this part, costs can really start creeping up later on in the renovation. The other piece is you want to start managing or planning for resources. So who's going to do the work? So one of the things you'll see if you download the project plan is there's a resources tab, and there's places there where you can actually put a contractor's name or you could put your own name. And it allows you to see what the cost savings would be if you did the work on your own, based on some of the estimates that you got from the contractors. So, for example, there were instances where I needed to get some wires reran in a bulkhead. I needed to hire an electrician for that. And that's what I put down under the resource phase, that's right under the resource phase. I put down an electrician there. But there's other things such as breaking the bulkhead and checking to exposing the drywall. That's something Poonam and I did on our own, because there was a cost to that with the contractor. But all that will become clear when you actually download the plan. The other thing you want to start doing in the planning phase is actually start planning for the orders. So here's what I mean by this, and this is very, very, very important. If you're planning to have appliances that need to get delivered by a certain date, or if you're planning to have floors, for example, delivered by a certain date, if you don't plan for that in advance, you may be in a situation where your floors are going to come after some of your cabinets start getting installed. And, sometimes that's okay. It works out. People are okay to just run the floors to the cabinets, but I ran the floors underneath the cabinets. Or you could be in an instance where your appliances have come, but your gas line hasn't been put in for your stove. So that creates some additional rework as well. So you really want to make sure that you plan this accordingly. The next phase of the plan is demolition. And I'm going to have Poonam walk you through the demo phase.
So demolition is essentially removing the things that, of course, you want to renovate. So in the kitchen, majority of the demolition we did. A lot of people outsource that, and I guess I scratch my head about why, because it's actually a really fun experience. If you've had a bad day at work, you can just take it out on the cabinets. And it's a lot of fun. There is a lot of mess involved in it. So if you have OCD like I do, it definitely tests your patience. But at the end of it, when you see the finished product, it's all worth it. So in the kitchen, what we demoed was the hardwood floors. Because there was a different type of hardwood flooring that was going towards our family room, and then there was tile in the kitchen, and it's all one open concept. So Sats and I had decided that we wanted it to be kind of an open concept, and we wanted it to be a continuous flooring. So of course that meant that we would have to get rid of all the floors, just to kind of give it that one layout.
So when we did remove the floors, do you remember the ordeal we went through with those tiles?
Yeah, I do.
And we had to actually get a hammer drill to get through some of it, because there was this wire mesh that was just flying out of nowhere, and it got really messy. And I know you got involved in that process as well.
Yeah. I guess you don't realize. That's a good tidbit to tell everybody, is that you don't realize what's underneath everything until you actually sort of demo it. So even going as far as the cabinets, initially we were going to do the demolition of the cabinets, but something that we learned through research was that Habitat for Humanity, which I'm sure everybody knows about, is an organization that actually will take pretty well-conditioned products such as appliances and well-kept cabinets, and they will sell them at a discounted price for families that have a lower socioeconomic status. So we looked at it as a charitable opportunity for us. And the cabinets that we had were just builder cabinets. They were just, sort of old for us, and we wanted to modernize our kitchen. So there wasn't really anything wrong with them. So we had actually contacted Habitat for Humanity, and they come in. So just a little note for everybody is that not everything gets accepted by Habitat for Humanity. So they do come in, they take the time to sort of assess your items that you want to be giving to them. And based on their assessment, they'll give you a yay or a nay. So luckily for us, our cabinets were in good condition. So because they assessed it and said, yes, this is good condition, cupboards, we'll take them. They also offered to demolition them, like demo them. So take them apart and unassemble them and actually put them into their truck. So as far as all of that from beginning to end, they took care of it, which was really helpful for us. And then at the end of it, we got the perk of being provided with a tax receipt for income tax purposes. So that's just something. They also had taken our appliances. When we bought the house, we had stainless steel appliances, which is exactly what Sats and I wanted. So we thought, oh, bonus, this comes in with the price. But once you go into a home, you start realizing things don't always necessarily look the way they appear to be. So I will tell you from experience, like I had mentioned earlier, I have OCD, so everything has its own prim and proper place, and everything has to smell good. So if you walk into my house, there's scents everywhere. Candles, Febreze, you name it. I get complimented on it all the time. So when I walked into this fridge, I knew I had to clean it because, of course, somebody else's items were in it, and I wanted to, put my groceries and things in it eventually. But I started realizing that there was a lot of mess in there. There was rotten food. So I tried to bleach it. I tried to, do whatever I could. I had to actually put on a mask because it was so awful smelling. But it ended up being that I was able to clean it out and it looked really nice. But because I knew what it looked like and the space for it, I started realizing that it was just not going to be enough for us. We ended up actually giving that to Habitat for Humanity as well. But I did make sure that it was clean and it looked presentable. So of course, when they come in to assess, they're going to look at that. So don't be looking into just getting rid of your quote unquote trash, because this is going, to other homes and to people who may not be as privileged as us. And so you don't want to be giving them, garbage items. You want to give them something that they can build a home with. So we ended up actually keeping the dishwasher, though. That was about the only appliance in the kitchen that we actually ended up keeping. And so what we ended up doing with that is we literally, disconnected the plumbing and everything for it and put it in a safe spot. For us, the safe spot at this point, because everything was being demoed, was our garage. Wasn't ideal, but it did the job. So when you're demolitioning things, you kind of want to assess and see, okay, what are the items that you want to keep? What are the items that you want to look into giving away or possibly just throwing out because they're just not up to par for anybody? And then, making that room. And again, going back to what Sats was saying earlier, making sure you're actually adjusting for that space, because when you're planning, you want to plan for the dimensions and the width and the depth and the whole 9 yards. So
okay, so I'm actually going to jump in because I think you were, I think you were nice about certain things. So there's one thing I really want to emphasize, or I really want to talk about in terms of an experience. When we actually got possession of that house, and I opened the doors to those, so there's French doors on that fridge, and I opened the doors to that fridge, I felt like a baseball bat just hit me right in the face. It reeked. It stunk so bad. And I was concerned. I was like, is this fridge even habitable? Like, can I even put things in this without dying? It was that bad. It was funny because when we actually moved the fridge and the stove and everything over to the other room, I had some buddies come over just to sort of see how the demo was going like. And I remember opening the fridge and the mood in the room just changed. Everybody was kind of just dumbfounded. They looked like they were disgusted, and they were kind of like, what is that smell? And, at first I didn't tell him and I thought it was funny. I just wanted to sort of see the reaction. But, eventually we told him. But I will say Poonam did a fantastic job. That smell was gone. And overall, the fridge it was great. One of the reasons why we also didn't decide to keep it is we actually got a wider fridge. The fridge that we got with the house was 30 inches, and we wanted a 36. That was one of the main reasons why we actually switched up the fridge. But it was a hilarious moment. I'm not gonna lie. Mm-hmm. In terms of the next phase, so we talked about planning, we talked about demo. The next phase is adjustments and repairs, and in this phase is it's really about discovery. So, you've taken off the backsplash, you've taken off the floor, you've taken off whatever you basically can, and you've gutted the kitchen. And if you actually go to the website, to the show notes at toolandtie.com/episode 4, I actually show you a picture of what the kitchen looked like before, what it looked like while it was going through the renovation process in terms of getting gutted, the installation process, and the final product. So you can actually go and take a look at that. Now, going back to adjustments and repairs, why I say this is actually about discovery is because there's certain things that are known and there's certain things that are unknown. So, for example, when you take off a backsplash from a kitchen, you're going to have to do some adjustments to it and some repairs to the drywall. The drywall, is not going to come off. It's not just going to peel off the drywall. You're going to have to break part of the drywall. You may have to cut out the drywall and put in new drywall. So that's kind of some of the adjustments and the repairs that you're going to have to do. But then there's unknown pieces. So one of the things that we wanted to do as well is we actually had a bulkhead above our kitchen. And I was very concerned that there was plumbing in that bulkhead because what we actually wanted to do is we wanted to move the bulkhead back. The bulkhead actually came out almost a foot. It was almost 14 inches actually. So just a little over a foot. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to move that bulkhead back 6 to 8 inches so that I don't have to worry about a big bulkhead sticking out above my cabinets. And this is where the unknown came. So I had to make some adjustments and repairs here. I was hoping there was no plumbing, and thank God when we broke that bulkhead, there was no plumbing. There was just electrical wires that needed to get rerouted. And so I wasn't comfortable doing that because there was about 15 or 20 wires in that bulkhead that were feeding multiple areas of the house. So I thought it'd be best to go and get an electrician for that. That's just one of the examples in terms of adjustments and repairs. And you're going to have to do that a lot. Sometimes you may find that when you rip up your floor, there's part of your floor that's actually rotted. Luckily, we didn't have to deal with that too much, but we did a bathroom renovation, which is going to be a separate podcast. And I'll talk to you about making adjustments to your subfloor if you find that part of your subfloor is rotted away. And we did do some fixing of the subfloor in that one, but that's for a later podcast. So moving on to the next step, which is, so we've talked about planning, we've talked about demo, we've talked about adjustments and repairs. Now we're going to talk about installation. Now in the installation phase, this is kind of like playing Lego. This is where you're going to start putting the pieces back together. So when we actually did our kitchen renovation, we started out with making sure that we had all the hardwood floors laid out. And the reason is because the hardwood floor is actually connected into the family room, and we just wanted to get that transition over with and done. Now, the actual insulation for the hardwood floors, Poonam had actually did most of that on her own. And now keep in mind, guys, she has not done any kind of these renovations in the past. So she's almost a rookie to this, and she did a fantastic job. So Poonam, why don't you maybe share some tips on installing hardwood floors with our listeners?
Sure. So a few tips that I learned along the way that I think would be helpful for others is firstly, screwing down the subfloor. So after all the demolition that we had done, that was all that was really left in our family room. So we pretty much walked around, jumped around certain areas just to make sure that there weren't any creaks and squeaks. And wherever we've heard those, that's where we wanted to screw down the subfloor. Another tidbit to take home is not to follow a certain pattern with the hardwood flooring. So just because it can get a little bit messy. And also you want to glue down your floor because it helps to prevent any of the squeaks and creaks that may creep up. And also when you're laying down your hardwood flooring, when you lay down a row of floors, you want to make sure that the seam of the next row is around 6 inches from the seam of the first floor. so that it increases the stability of the hardwood flooring, and it also prevents further squeaks and creaks.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point. And just to elaborate on that a little bit more, if you actually have the seams too close to each other, that actually compromises the integrity of the hardwood floors. It doesn't create a lot of stability because it creates almost what you would call weak points. So you want to make sure those seams are far apart. So that's actually a very good tip. So in your kitchen renovation, after you get the hardwood floors installed, the next thing that we did is we actually got the cabinets installed, and that process takes a couple of hours, and it takes a little bit of prep to make sure that if there's any requirements in terms of your plumbing or electrical that need to be done, you need to do those beforehand. But I'm going to assume that's already been done, or you haven't changed a lot around that. But your cabinets would go in next. And what you also want to do with while your cabinets are getting installed is create the rough-in. So if you got places where your sink pipes, your hot and cold water, for example, you need to drill some holes into your cabinets to make sure that those slide through properly. Your dishwasher, any fridge water lines, and what have you. Now, after you've actually laid down your after you've installed your cabinets, the next thing that you want to do is install your appliances. And the appliances are going to be important to put in because you actually want to put the appliances, or you want to try fitting in those appliances before the countertop goes in. And one of the things that we learned is we actually bought a Wolf stove. It's a 36-inch Wolf stove, and it's like a monstrous stove. One of the things that we wanted to make sure is once we slid in that stove, that after the countertops went in, that they didn't actually overlap the stove, or they didn't hit the stove, or there was no issues around that, because once those countertops go in, it's very, very hard to take them back out because they actually use kind of an epoxy to seal it to the cabinets. And after that point, it gets very, very difficult to move it. So we decided to put our appliances in first. It's also something that the kitchen company recommended. So we went with that recommendation. And so, everything went out very good. So that's good. And then the last thing you want to do after your countertop goes in is install the backsplash. If you are going to put in a backsplash. It takes a little bit of prep work because you got to make sure that your drywall is at least primed so that your backsplash will stick to it. We actually used a kind of a pre-made thin set. We didn't actually have to mix it, and you can buy that from the home improvement stores. And you put on your backsplash, and then we also put a pre-finished grout because I wanted to make sure I get the right contour and the right texture. So that's sort of a little bit on the installation phase. Now, we've talked about planning, we've talked about demo, we've talked about adjustments and repairs, installation. The next one is the refine phase. And I'm going to actually have Poonam talk about the refine phase because with our kitchen renovation, she actually did a great job. And after the refine phase is the cleaning phase. I'm going to have her talk about that as well because these are two very important aspects of the framework that she actually had a very, very large part in taking over and managing.
So going back to the refine phase, that's really where we start talking a little bit more about the colors, the contrasts, the type of paint. So of course, during the demolition, there's a lot of paint that gets chipped. You get some nicks and scratches on the walls and things like that. Also on the hardwood flooring, there's the first and the last rows essentially have screws that we put in. So those need to be also hidden. So for the hardwood floors, we used putty to sort of conceal those screws and just to kind of give it sort of a clean look so that you're not seeing the silver sort of head of the screw for everybody to see. As far as the nicks and scratches along the way, I mean, that's inevitable. It's going to happen. So, of course, you just, you look at what the wall paint looks like. And for us, we were fortunate in sort of our demolition because the walls, we actually didn't mind the color. So what we did was, this is also something that we learned along the way, is we actually took a sample of some of the some of the paint off of our wall that was already existing. And we were able to actually get that matched to a T at either a Home Depot paint section, or you can go to Benjamin Moore, you can go to Sherwin-Williams, like whoever you feel you want to have the paint done from or bought from. So they're able to match it. So we were able to do that. Of course, if there's nicks and scratches on the wall and you want to look into sort of renewing that and refreshing it with a different color, a different contrast or whatever, then, that part comes later when you're done the cleanup. So that actually goes into the cleanup, the cleaning phase, which is the last phase. And this was where I finally sort of hit my peak of OCD and said, okay, this is enough. Enough is enough. So months and months of demolition, reinstalling, refining, and now we had to clean. So I looked into initially some Molly Maids and looked into, some deep clean. So what they call it is a construction clean, pre-construction clean, I should say, post-construction, I'm sorry. So that essentially means after the demolition and everything's been done, there's a lot of, grout and cement and all that stuff that's flying around. One thing I learned was, it is very costly. Again, it depends on the extent of your demolition. The cost may actually outweigh the amount of work that's entailed. For us, it was kind of essentially sort of segregated and isolated in one area, and I kind of felt like I could do it myself. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what I ended up doing. Also, we were on a budget and we didn't kind of gauge for that. But going back to the Molly Maids and getting that deep construction clean, the quotes that I got were anywhere between $50 an hour to $75 an hour. And essentially people would be coming not as one person, but they would be coming as a team. So I would assume that the agency would just split that cost between the number of people that would be here. But the other thing was that if they were going to come to do a construction clean, there was a stipulation, and that stipulation was that they had to have at least 3 hours worth of work. So when you're looking into this, this route or avenue, you want to look into, are you going to get your best bang for your buck, and are they going to be able to actually be able to do 3 hours worth of work. And lastly, the last tidbit that I kind of want to share with you guys is that when they're doing their clean, make sure that they have WSIB and make sure that they have liability insurance, because God forbid things do not go according to plan and they end up having an accident, because there are a lot of things that are hanging around, screws and loose objects, because you've just had a demolition done. You don't want to be liable for any of that. So you want to make sure that they're, protected, as well as yourself being protected. And sorry, I lied. My last tidbit is also that they will expect you to cover all of your appliances and cover your furniture. So if there's an area that you need to do a deep clean, they want you to pretty much, put a tarp on top or whatever to sort of keep that area or that product of yours clear. And they do not move around the furniture. So they will work around it. So if you want them to get behind the furniture, behind the appliances, you essentially have to move them because that's a liability, I guess, on their part. And they don't want to be responsible for any nicks and scratches and things like that on your hardwood floors or on your appliances and whatnot. So I think that pretty much sums up as far as the last phase goes.
Yeah, no, that's actually very good. A very good tip, or very good couple of tips. The one thing I actually wanted to elaborate on that I didn't focus on, and I'm glad you brought it up, was the whole concept around making sure that they're licensed and insured and whatnot. And that's the case for any contractor, any sub-trade out there. You want to make sure, even if you decide to fully contract this out to somebody, you want to make sure that they're licensed, that they're bonded, that they're insured. It is your right as a customer. And if there's a contractor who's basically saying, I've done this for 25 years, I don't need the insurance, I would really not rely on that kind of that kind of a sub-trade or that kind of a contractor. They can, they'll give you 1,000,001 reasons as to why it's not a good idea to have it, and they'll throw in the guilt factor and saying, don't you trust me? Look at my work. At the end of the day, anything can go wrong at any point in time, and if they're not licensed and if they're not insured, you're going to be liable for that, and you certainly don't deserve that if you're forking over that kind of money. So that's great. So, like I said, we went through the different phases. You can go into the show notes, and the show notes sort of reflect some of the conversation that we've had today. Again, you can also look at the ebook that I'm going to be creating. It should be ready by the end of this month. By the end of this month, I say the end of May 2015. And if you want, you can always shoot me an email at sats@toolandtie.com to let me know if you're interested, and I could put you on a list to basically get a preview at it. The book has been written; it's already done, and I've already ran it through the ringer with a lot of people, and they're very excited about the launch of the book. I'm very excited about the launch of the book. They felt it's helped them a lot. Just to give you some context in terms of savings. So when we actually did our renovation, we had a budget of around $45,000, including the contingency fund for our kitchen only. And when we got some bids from the contractors were basically charging an additional $18,540. And when I say an additional, these are for contractors that we did not go with, and we decided to do the work on our own. Some of the contractors we did subtrade. So essentially, the point of the story is by doing this a DIY style, we saved ourselves $18,540 on this renovation by doing the kitchen renovation ourselves. So again, if you'd like, go to the show notes, www.toolandtie.com/episode 4, just to get a recap of this podcast. Shoot me an email if you've got any questions. Again, I'd like to thank Poonam for being on the show. And until the next podcast, stay safe, stay healthy, stay productive.